Hello, my name is Tadhg O'Donovan. I am the head of engineering and physical sciences on the Dubai campus of Heriot-Watt University. And I'm talking to you today about the role of robotics, essentially. So the title here is Regional Trends in the Adoption of Industrial and Consumer Robots. And I will do my best to try to explain, well, what robotics can do today, and hopefully give you some insights into how I think robotics will have an influence in our lives, in industrial practices, and how we as a society will engage with robotics in the future. So I have a few slides prepared and I'll just progress through them, and happy to take some questions at the end. So when I was asked to do this, my only ask that I had in response was to perhaps to try to broaden out the title a little bit. And I did that for what I thought was good reason. So instead of just focusing on robotics, I wanted to talk about autonomous and interactive systems as well. And the reason I do that is to, first of all, to try to address sometimes a misconception about what robotics are, or kind of a limiting conception of what robotics are. So I could be wrong, but many people, when they first think of a robot, they probably think of this image here on the left-hand side, something that we would call a humanoid robot, something that looks or tries to mimic human behavior with limbs, a head, something that it's able to move around, perhaps interact with people. You might also think of robots as mechanical systems that perform often a repetitive task, as you might see on the right-hand side there. So these kind of robots that are doing something in a manufacturing scenario. But robots, autonomous, interactive systems, there's so much more than that. The autonomy of robots, and the more they're becoming more autonomous, the more the whole area is developing. And then interactive systems. Interactive systems kind of fall within robotics as well, but to a certain extent may not have that kind of mechanical aspect to it. An interactive system is an algorithm. It is Alexa, Google, these type of things and how they work together. So in a way, robotics can be classified into many different areas. And one way of classifying them is in terms of intelligence. So I have written some points at the bottom. You can see humanoid robots. You might look at robotics as mechanical systems, autonomous vehicles, like electric vehicles now, then also looking at autonomous drive systems. And then an element of intelligence, going to artificial intelligence, digital interfaces, ones that perhaps recognize you and are a bit more aware of their surroundings, and even data mining and machine learning. So what do I mean by all those terms? Well, if I look at the hierarchy of intelligence, you might consider, first of all, a robot as something, a mechanical system, that is to a certain extent aware of its surroundings and has been programmed or asked to do a certain task. So a robot might be something that does a repetitive task. It would ideally do it at a very high accuracy and precision, and ideally at quite a quick pace, something that begins to replace a mundane task that a human might employ. But as you go up through that hierarchy, it's really got to do with the intelligence. So as they become more aware of their surroundings, so many more sensors where they can understand temperature, they can understand proximity, they can recognize images, they can recognize objects. They also have an element of autonomy. They're able to move around. And then as you go more and more sophisticated, can they use that input, that awareness of their environment, together with an algorithm to make a decision? So instead of it being a repetitive or remote controlled or pre-programmed task, can they make a decision in a positive way? So they were designed to do a certain function that was a little bit more vague, and they had to decide themselves how to do it. And then as you get more and more sophisticated, can they learn? Can they learn about their environment? Now, an example you might be more familiar with is these kind of autonomous vacuum cleaners, the ones that go around when you're not at home and vacuum up. They begin to learn their environment. First of all, they stop bumping into walls. They begin to remember where the walls are, and they plan their way around. And ideally, with time, the more they do it, the more sophisticated they can get, and the more speedy, or they can perform the task much more quickly. And then, so this is an element of learning. This is where they have memory, and the more they do it, the more repetitive it is, the more they can optimize that task. So that's bringing in an element of artificial intelligence and then machine learning. The more data they have, and that's just a very simple example, the better they are. So my central point here is that robotics is not just your typical robot. It is about autonomous systems, and it's about interactive systems and how they can all work together. So let's look now a little bit about market trends and how the role that robotics and interactive systems and autonomous systems might have in the UAE, in the region here, and generally to service society. So I have a slide later about the fourth industrial revolution, what that really means. I think it's really important that we're aware of it, because being aware of it is something where we can take full advantage of it. I'll talk a little bit about that in a future slide. The other word is smart. What does smart mean? And we've heard a lot about smart Dubai and then smart nearly everything. How are systems learning, and how are systems becoming better at interacting with us? One really smart thing, and we deal with it all the time, is maybe a Google search, or when I watch one YouTube video, it suggests you might like this, or when I buy something on Amazon, it suggests me other people have bought things like this. Have you ever asked yourself why there's no loyalty card in Amazon? Well, because they already have your data. They know so much about where you click and what you've navigated to, and they're able to use that. Whereas obviously, if you're in Carrefour and you have a loyalty card, every time you click that, they're gathering data about your customer experience. What do you buy? And that helps them to even place certain things in a certain shelf on a certain way that might attract you as a category of customer to well, hopefully in a virtuous way, make your shopping experience more enjoyable. One of the key robotics and autonomous systems here in the UAE to pick out, though, is in the construction industry. There is an ambition here in Dubai for 25% of buildings to have 3D printed, to be 3D printed by 2030, which is not that long away. And that is one of the areas that is at the research, at the forefront of research, and is having a lot of impact today, and you can see it happening everywhere. It has huge potential to be more sustainable, to better use of materials, and to ensure things like the precision, the accuracy, and even the strength of the build from that. And also, obviously, the repetition of the build. Once it works once and has been proven, then it should be easy to replicate and do so in a quick time, driving down costs and hopefully improving standards while doing so in a sustainable way. And that obviously is one of the key goals that we have as a global society. And then we look at artificial intelligence. Sensors are so important to this. So how much a device or an object can learn? Can it face recognize? Can it understand your behavior? And what other things does it need to know that influence behavior? That leads to, obviously, artificial intelligence controllers that can become smarter with time. And as we become more connected, and connection is key here, but through maybe the Internet of Things, it's all well and good gathering data in a closed form in a small environment. However, if you can connect that data through the internet, so you're gathering data from your user experience in all different parts of Dubai or all different parts of the world, cybersecurity becomes a significant issue, because data is power, and that power needs to be protected and used, obviously, in a good and virtuous way. So cybersecurity is one of the biggest growth industries, especially here in the Middle East. But the power of AI, the other ones I wanted to focus on, particularly here where healthcare is such a big industry, is genetics and digital healthcare. So a lot of it to do, and you could argue a lot with COVID, where people are able to self-diagnose, we're able to remote monitor or provide as much information to doctors remotely, is becoming much more prevalent in society, and all fits within this whole area. And again, feedback to how important cybersecurity is, therefore. So to talk about the fourth industrial revolution, well, it's in our name. James Watt was the perhaps responsible for the first industrial revolution with the steam power plant. But now that we're getting to the fourth industrial revolution, we're looking at a rapid increase in development again. It is data is power, and this big data, and depending on how that data is used, how it is used to make decisions, how it is used to improve user experience. That's what's happening with the fourth industrial revolution. So what is the role of robotics in society? Well, it helps to develop technology. It is very important in improving user and customer experience and to stay competitive. So if you have a customer base, there is a certain element now of expectation that your customer experience is going to improve all the time. So whether it is checking into a hotel and your profile is already known by the hotelier, and they know your preferences or what time you'd likely to check in and what you like to do, these data should be and are becoming more and more available and improving the experience. So you are no longer, or should no longer just be an other person, but you are treated as the individual that you are with your data being available. And then, but from a manufacturing perspective, it's about process efficiency. And often many processes are very, very complicated with multiple variables that can influence the overall process, but also the eventual product. The more you can train these artificial intelligence algorithms, the better they can identify patterns that can overall improve the eventual product that is to be produced. So it really is about artificial intelligence is about pushing to the fore new ideas that perhaps haven't come from the person, but they're coming from the big data that is there to identify patterns that would have otherwise remained unseen. And this leads us to the power of data. So how much data are we able to collect? The value of that data, because if you are to use that data, then how can you identify patterns in it? So you need to have, first of all, the quantity of the data, but also the quality of the data that will help individuals, help algorithms to make decisions that are positive. It will bring in questions about ethics, as those decisions are being taken away often from individuals, but those are also challenges that will face this industry in the future. So that is essentially the artificial intelligence. We individuals still train the neural networks or whatever it is of the artificial intelligence, but we also train it how to learn. And on that, you'll probably have to come up with codes of ethics and how well that is going to perform. So what is the future vision for innovation? Well, for us, it's looking at virtual innovation, the virtual experience. As you'll probably know, consumers are moving away from tangible things and moving more into the experiential thing. The experiential market is the one that is increasing. So virtual innovation is very much a growth industry, and that also brings in robotics. Physical validation will be important, and we as an institution work on collaboration, and we're very much customer focused. So virtual environments are ones that are growth. While I have an image here of virtual reality, I personally think that there's probably more growth, more potential in augmented realities, things that are going to enhance our user experience in the real environment, but by giving us much more information about what is going on in the virtual environment. So it's the synergy, or it's the combination of those two environments that will have a lot of power. So looking with my final slide here, looking to the future, where do we see the growth areas? Well, it's going to be smart homes and smart cities. So essentially, these are two different scales of the same thing. So to what extent is my home autonomous? How much does it run itself? How much of it is a subscription service from my TV channels to my fridge and my delivery of food to the control of the lighting, sound, and everything? How much does it learn about my pattern, and how much of that is decided for me? Smart cities then obviously on a much grander scale. How do we link in everything from healthcare to driving around our cities to synergistically combining different dwellings, different industries, so that we can even be much more sustainable. Some of the key challenges that we have at the moment will be last mile delivery. That's, if you were to talk about sustainability, not just in terms of financial sustainability, but in terms of environment, then last mile delivery is one of the biggest ones. And there's lots of trials going on at the moment about how drones and autonomous vehicles can deliver your products to your homes in the last mile autonomously. Product manufacture is another, and there is something to be said for maybe doing a lot more product manufacture a lot more locally, using robots, for example, for autonomous manufacture. So maybe we're trading more in the design in future. That's what I buy when I'm buying from Amazon, perhaps. And then when I have my key code or my QR code that I've bought that, I could go to a local manufacturer and ask them to manufacture for me using 3D printing, laser cutting, and very rapid manufacturing processes, cutting down again on the transport of goods, as well as packaging and things like that. And so there's a huge role that robotics could have in that. So, and that is just to summarize on that high note. I think one of the largest challenges that are facing society today is sustainability. And I think that robotics, autonomous and interactive systems have a significant role to play in ensuring that we are able to live up to our sustainability commitments. So I thank you for listening, and I'm happy to take a question.
So thank you, Professor O'Donovan. Absolutely brilliant presentation. I like the way how you added autonomous and interactive systems. I think that's something that the industry tends to miss out as part of the robotic dynamics. So very interesting. Also the movement from tangible to experiential, I think key driver over there. And obviously audience very interested to take your learning over the region into some practical form. The question is that, do you think there's any particular hotspot or early adoption where commercial returns are possible in the area of robotics? Now, obviously for you, robotics is much broader than just industrial and consumer, but go ahead. Any answer would be great. Go ahead.
I'll probably highlight two. I've mentioned them briefly, but I'll take another minute just to emphasize them. One is certainly in manufacture and in the construction industry. The UAE, Dubai as well, are very good at setting very ambitious goals. But it's so important to have these ambitious goals because they begin to drive innovation. So the idea of having 30% of construction, and that's a huge industry here in the UAE, but also in the Middle East, to have that ambitious goal of 30% is quite significant. So I think that is certainly going to be a growth industry. For those, and I think the more we adopt into it, it's still at a relatively low TRL, technology readiness level. It's at the demonstrator stage, I would say. There are probably a couple of good examples of it, but by 2030 to reach those ambitious goals, I think that's going to be one. The other one that I think is particularly significant here in the UAE is last mile delivery. Obviously, we have a very consumer society. The pandemic has seen a huge increase in the amount of delivery services for obvious reasons, and it's actually sustainability. It's not a bad idea at all. It's quite an efficient way of doing things, but it could even be more efficient, and cutting down the time, cutting down the cost of it would give you competitive advantage. So I think there is going forward, I think robotic devices, whether those autonomous little carts that are driving around, or whether they're going to be drones leaving your Amazon delivery on your doorstep, I think in the next few years we'll see some dramatic differences in that sector.
Thank you. Absolutely brilliant answer, Professor Donovan. And as you rightly mentioned, with the nation putting milestones and objectives to reach, clearly the industry, the industrial innovation, the industrial investment will focus around those things. And Absolutely. As you said, dramatic things to come in the months and years ahead. So thank you very much, Professor Donovan, for that absolutely brilliant presentation. Look forward to some more insights again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for listening.